Her father needed a heart transplant. There was only one surgeon in Chicago who could save him.
Dr. Cole's success rate is 96.4%. The next closest surgeon is 88%. He is the best cardiothoracic surgeon in Chicago. Who is this Dr. Cole?
The room went completely silent.
He is the man you said was not good enough for me. Mother!
The morning Eleanor Montgomery told her daughter that Daniel Cole was not good enough, she was wearing pearls. This was not unusual. Eleanor Montgomery wore pearls the way other women wore confidence, as a first layer, put on before anything else, before the day had a chance to suggest that she might need something more substantial. She was 61 years old, thin in the way of women who have never once eaten without thinking about it, and she sat at the breakfast table in the Montgomery house on Astor Street, a 4-story limestone townhouse that had been in the family since 1967. With the posture of someone who had never in her life leaned against anything for support. Zara was 27. She sat across from her mother with her coffee and said nothing, which was the response she had perfected over 27 years of breakfasts that felt like depositions. He has no family, Eleanor said. No connections. No history. You cannot build a life with someone who has no foundation. He has a medical degree from Johns Hopkins, Zara said. A degree is not a foundation, Eleanor said. A degree is a starting point. Your father started with a foundation. That is the difference. Zara looked at her coffee. The foundation Eleanor was referring to was the Montgomery Group, a real estate development company that her father, Harold Montgomery, had inherited from his father, expanded through the 70s and 80s into something that now had its name on 11 buildings in the Chicago Loop and managed commercial properties across 4 states. Harold Montgomery was 64 years old, broad-shouldered, with the handshake of a man who had learned early that the first physical impression was a negotiation. He had built nothing from nothing. He had taken something large and made it larger, which was its own kind of skill, and he knew it, and he made sure the people around him knew it too. He had not yet met Daniel Cole, but he had already made his decision. Zara had known Daniel for 8 months. She had met him at a fundraiser for Chicago Mercy Hospital, the kind of event where the food was good and the cause was real, and everyone in the room was there for some combination of both. She had been there representing the Montgomery Foundation, which her mother chaired and which gave money to medical causes because Eleanor had decided 12 years ago that medicine was the right kind of charity, serious, measurable, unlikely to embarrass anyone at a dinner party. Daniel had been there because Chicago Mercy was where he worked. He was a cardiothoracic surgeon, heart and chest, the deepest and most unforgiving territory in the human body. He was 31 years old. He had grown up in Englewood, on the south side of Chicago, in a 2-bedroom apartment on Carpenter Street where his mother, Gloria, had raised him and his younger sister Kezia alone after their father left when Daniel was 9. Gloria worked as a school cafeteria manager for 26 years. She had never missed a parent-teacher conference. She had never once told Daniel that anything was out of reach. She had simply kept showing up, every day, with the particular determination of a woman who had decided that her children's futures were worth more than her own exhaustion. Daniel had received a full scholarship to the University of Illinois at Chicago for his undergraduate degree. Then another scholarship, merit-based, competitive, awarded to 12 students nationwide, for Johns Hopkins School of Medicine. He had matched into one of the most competitive surgical residencies in the country at Northwestern Memorial. He had been at Chicago Mercy for 2 years now, building a reputation that was already larger than his title suggested, the kind of reputation that travels through hospital corridors and whispers, that makes senior surgeons stop and watch when a younger one is operating. He was, by every measure that Zara understood mattered, extraordinary. He was also, by every measure her parents understood, insufficient. At the fundraiser, he had been standing near the bar with a glass of water, not wine. Water, looking at a photograph on the wall. It was a black and white photograph of Chicago Mercy's original building, taken in 1923. He was looking at it with the focused attention of someone who found it genuinely interesting, not the performed attention of someone waiting to be noticed. Zara had stopped beside him because the photograph was interesting. "Do you know the history of this building?" he asked, without turning, as if he had known she was there. "Some of it," she said. "It was built by a man named Aurelius Webb," he said. "He was a black physician in 1920 Chicago when black physicians weren't allowed to admit patients to white hospitals. So he built his own, with money he saved for 11 years. He paused. "I think about that a lot. 11 years of saving to build something that should have already existed." Zara looked at the photograph. "Do you work here?" "Yes," he said. He turned and looked at her. "Do you?" "No," she said. "I'm here with the Montgomery Foundation." Something moved across his face, recognition, brief and complicated. "Montgomery Group," he said. "Your family's company is on 3 buildings I can see from my office window." "That's us," she said. Not proudly, just accurately. He nodded. He looked back at the photograph. "I'm Daniel," he said. "Zara," she said. They talked for 40 minutes about the photograph, about Aurelius Webb, about what it meant to build something in a city that wasn't designed for you. And by the end of the 40 minutes, Zara had said more true things to a stranger than she had said to most people she had known for years. He asked for her number. She gave it to him before she had time to think about whether she should. 8 months later, Eleanor Montgomery was wearing pearls at the breakfast table and explaining why Daniel Cole was not a foundation. Zara did not argue. She had learned, over 27 years, that arguing with Eleanor was like arguing with a building. You could make noise against it, but it did not move. She said she understood her mother's concerns. She said she would think about it. She drove directly from Astor Street to Chicago Mercy Hospital, where Daniel was finishing a 12-hour shift, and told him everything her mother had said. He listened without interrupting. He was still in his scrubs. There were shadows under his eyes from the shift. He looked, in that moment, like exactly what he was. A man who had spent 12 hours keeping other people's hearts beating. "What do you want to do?" he said when she finished. "I want to keep seeing you," she said. "Okay," he said. "My father hasn't met you yet," she said. "My mother is going to make sure that meeting goes badly." "Okay," he said again. She looked at him. "You're not worried?" He was quiet for a moment. "I've been in rooms where people decided I wasn't enough before I opened my mouth," he said. "I know what that feels like. It doesn't change what I know about myself." She drove home thinking about that sentence for 40 minutes. Harold Montgomery agreed to dinner on a Saturday in February, which Zara understood was a concession. Harold did not give his Saturdays easily. He had chosen the restaurant himself, Alinea, on North Halsted, where the tasting menu cost $400 a person and the reservations required 3 months advance notice. It was, Zara understood, a test designed to make Daniel feel small before the appetizers arrived. Daniel arrived 5 minutes early in a dark suit that was not expensive, but was well fitted and clean. He shook Harold's hand without hesitation and matched his grip. He held Eleanor's chair before the waiter could. He looked at the menu without any readable expression. Harold ordered for the table, which was his habit and his dominance move. Daniel said thank you, which was not the response Harold had been expecting. The first 20 minutes were Harold's questions, delivered with the pleasant efficiency of a man who interviews people for sport. "Johns Hopkins," Harold said. "Impressive institution. Your family is from the South Side." "Englewood," Daniel said. Harold nodded slowly. "And your father?" "He left when I was 9, Daniel said. "My mother raised us." "Cafeteria work," Harold said. He had done research. Zara had expected this and still felt her jaw tighten. "Yes," Daniel said. "For 26 years. She was extraordinary at it." Harold blinked. He had expected either defensiveness or apology. He got neither. "Cardiothoracic surgery," Harold said, pivoting. "That's heart and chest." "Yes." "And what does that pay? For a surgeon at your level?" Eleanor touched her pearls. "Harold," Zara said quietly. "It's a reasonable question," Harold said. I'm trying to understand what kind of future my daughter is looking at. Daniel set down his fork, not with anger, with the deliberate calm of someone who has decided exactly how much of himself to give to a room that has not yet earned it. Mr. Montgomery, he said, I understand what you're asking, and I'll answer it directly. My salary is sufficient. It will grow. But I don't think that's actually what you want to know. He paused. I think what you want to know is whether I am serious about your daughter, whether she is safe with me, whether I understand what she comes from, and whether I can be honest about what I come from. Another pause. The answer to all of those is yes. The table was quiet. Eleanor had stopped touching her pearls. Harold looked at Daniel for a long moment with the expression of a man recalibrating. Then he picked up his fork and said, The salmon here is exceptional. The dinner continued. It did not become warm, but it became civil, which was more than Zara had hoped for. In the car afterward, she said, You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, Daniel said. Not for him. For you. So you knew I wasn't going to pretend. Harold Montgomery's first episode happened on a Tuesday morning in March. He was at his desk on the 32nd floor of the Montgomery Group headquarters on Wacker Drive when the pain arrived. Not the sharp, dramatic pain of movies, but something worse, a pressure, a heaviness across his chest and down his left arm that told his body something his mind refused to accept. His assistant found him gray-faced and sweating, his hand flat on his desk, and called 911. He was in the emergency room at Northwestern Memorial within 22 minutes. The diagnosis was a massive myocardial infarction, a heart attack, significant, with damage to the left ventricle that the cardiologists on call described to Eleanor with careful faces and careful words that added up to something none of them wanted to say directly. He needed surgery. Not immediately. He was stabilized, but soon. Within 2 weeks. A coronary artery bypass, complex, involving 4 vessels, with complications from the extent of the damage that made the procedure high risk and the surgical requirements exceptional. Eleanor sat in the private waiting room on the 4th floor of Northwestern Memorial and called Zara. Zara arrived in 40 minutes with coffee she hadn't drunk and fear she wasn't showing. The cardiologist, Dr. Patricia Huang, explained the situation with the precision of someone who had delivered this kind of news many times and had learned that clarity was a form of kindness. The surgery itself is straightforward for an experienced cardiothoracic surgeon, Dr. Huang said. The complexity here is the extent of the vessel involvement in your husband's existing arterial condition. We want the best possible surgeon for this. The best cardiothoracic surgeon currently operating in Chicago, based on outcomes data, peer review, and case complexity, is at Chicago Mercy Hospital. Eleanor looked up. Who? Dr. Huang checked her notes, though Zara suspected she already knew the name without checking. Dr. Daniel Cole, she said. The room was very quiet. Eleanor's hand went to her pearls. Zara said nothing. She looked at her mother's face, watched the sequence of emotions cross it, none of them comfortable, and said nothing. There must be other options, Eleanor said finally. There are other excellent surgeons, Dr. Huang said carefully. I would be doing you a disservice if I didn't tell you that Dr. Cole's outcomes in cases of this complexity are significantly above the national average. He has performed this specific type of procedure 43 times in the past 2 years. His success rate is 96.4%. She paused. The next closest surgeon in the Chicago area has performed it 19 times with an 88% success rate. Eleanor looked at the table. I understand this may be complicated, Dr. Huang said, with the careful neutrality of someone who understood exactly how complicated it was, given the personal connection. That is entirely your family's decision to make. She left them with the information and the silence. Zara did not say I told you so. She did not say anything about Astor Street or the breakfast table or the pearls. She waited. Her mother looked up after a long time. Call him, Eleanor said. Her voice was very quiet. Please. Zara called Daniel from the hallway outside the waiting room. He answered on the second ring. She told him plainly, the diagnosis, the procedure, her father. She did not soften it or complicate it. She gave him the facts, and then she waited. There was a brief silence. "Which hospital is he at?" Daniel said. "Northwestern Memorial." "I'll come tonight," he said, "to meet with the care team and review his imaging." "Daniel." "Zara." His voice was steady. "He's your father. That's all I need to know." She stood in the hallway of Northwestern Memorial with her phone in her hand and felt something shift in her chest in the specific location where she had been holding her breath for 8 months. Daniel met with Harold Montgomery for the first time as his potential surgeon on a Wednesday evening in Harold's private room at Northwestern Memorial. Harold was sitting up in the hospital bed in a gown that was the great social equalizer, the garment that made no distinctions. He looked smaller than he had at Alinea. Not diminished exactly, just human in a way he rarely allowed himself to appear. Daniel came in alone. No team, no props. He pulled a chair to the bedside and sat down at Harold's level, which was a thing Zara noticed. He did not stand over him. He explained the procedure. He used clear language, not simplified language. There was a difference, and Harold Montgomery was a man who would know it. He drew a small diagram on a notepad. He explained the risks. He answered Harold's questions, and Harold had good questions, precise ones, the questions of a man who had built a career on understanding complex systems. At the end, Harold was quiet for a moment. "Why would you do this?" he said. "After what I said to you at dinner." Daniel looked at him steadily. "Because it's the right thing to do," he said. "And because Zara loves you." Harold looked at his hands. The hands that had signed billion-dollar contracts and poured coffee in his daughter's first apartment and held Eleanor's hand in the waiting room of this same hospital when Zara was born. "I was wrong about you," Harold said. "Not easily, but fully. You were making decisions based on what you knew," Daniel said. "That's not entirely wrong. It's just incomplete." Harold looked at him for a long moment. "Will you take my case?" he said. "Yes," Daniel said. "I'll take your case." The surgery was on a Friday morning in April. It lasted 6 hours and 14 minutes. Eleanor sat in the private waiting room with Zara and Kezia, Daniel's sister, who had come from her job as a high school math teacher in Evanston and who sat with Eleanor and talked about completely ordinary things for 6 hours in the way that only genuinely kind people know how to do in rooms that are full of fear. At 2:17 in the afternoon, Daniel came through the door in his surgical cap and scrubs, and Eleanor Montgomery stood up before he had said a word, and the expression on his face told her everything. "He did well," Daniel said. "The procedure went as planned. He's in recovery." Eleanor sat back down. She put her face in her hands. She cried with the specific release of someone who has been holding something for a very long time. Kezia put her hand on Eleanor's back. Zara looked at Daniel across the room. He looked tired and steady and exactly like himself. "Thank you," she said. "Just that." He nodded. "Just that." Harold Montgomery came home to Astor Street on a Thursday in May. He moved more slowly than before. The surgery had done what it needed to do, and the recovery was doing what it needed to do, and his cardiologist told him that with consistent care and reasonable lifestyle changes, he had every reason to expect a full and long life. On a Sunday afternoon in June, Daniel came to the house on Astor Street for dinner. Not a test dinner, a Sunday dinner. Gloria Cole came too, Daniel's mother, who arrived with a dish she called her Sunday chicken that she had been making since Daniel and Kezia were small, and which she set on the Montgomery kitchen counter without ceremony. Eleanor looked at the dish. She looked at Gloria. Gloria smiled with the uncomplicated warmth of a woman who had spent 26 years feeding other people's children and knew exactly what food was for. "Can I help you with anything?" Eleanor asked. "You can get me a serving spoon," Gloria said, "and tell me where you keep your good plates." Eleanor got the serving spoon. She got the good plates. She set the table herself for the first time in longer than she could remember. Harold sat in the living room with Daniel and talked for an hour about the history of the Montgomery Group buildings, the ones that Daniel could see from his office window. and about Aurelius Webb, and about what it meant to build something in a city that wasn't designed for you. Harold had looked up Aurelius Webb after the dinner at Alinea. He did not say this, but Daniel noticed the questions Harold asked and understood. At the dinner table, Gloria told a story about Daniel at 12 years old taking apart the kitchen radio to see how it worked and being unable to put it back together. And Eleanor laughed, a real laugh, unplanned, the kind that arrives before you can decide whether to allow it. Harold watched his wife laugh. He watched his daughter watch Daniel. He watched Gloria Cole pass the serving dish to Eleanor with the easy generosity of someone who has never once kept score. He thought about the word foundation, about what it actually meant, about the difference between what you inherited and what you built, about 11 years of saving to construct something that should have already existed. He thought about a man who had grown up in Englewood and operated on 43 complicated hearts and had sat down at Harold's level in a hospital bed and said it's the right thing to do. He thought about his own heart, repaired now, beating steadily in his chest, and about who had repaired it. After dinner, Harold found Daniel on the back porch. The June evening was warm. The city was going about its business beyond the garden wall. Harold stood beside him. He did not say anything for a moment. "I owe you an apology," Harold said. "A real one, not the one I gave you in the hospital, which was true but insufficient." Daniel waited. "I looked at you, and I saw what you didn't have," Harold said. "I didn't look at what you'd built. That was a failure of vision. In business, I would call that unforgivable." He paused. "In a father, I'll call it correctable." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "I appreciate that," he said. Harold nodded. He looked at the garden. "My father built this house," he said. "He always said the most important thing about a foundation wasn't how deep it went. It was what it was made of." He paused. "I think I forgot that somewhere." They stood on the porch in the June evening, the two of them, in the particular quiet of men who have said the necessary thing and can now simply stand together. Daniel proposed on a Saturday morning in September, not at a restaurant, not with theater, on the rooftop of Chicago Mercy Hospital, where he sometimes went between shifts to look at the city, the 11 Montgomery Group buildings visible from where they stood, and beyond them the lake, vast and blue and entirely indifferent to everything human beings decided mattered. He had the ring in his jacket pocket. It had been his grandmother's, a small oval sapphire on a simple gold band, worn smooth by decades of ordinary days. He didn't rehearse his speech. He said what was true. "I don't have a family name that opens doors," he said. "I don't have a house on Astor Street or buildings with my name on them. What I have is this city from this rooftop and the absolute certainty that you are the clearest thing in my life." He took the ring from his pocket. "I would like to keep building with you, if you'll let me." Zara looked at the ring. She looked at the city. She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "The way you say something you have known for a long time and are finally saying out loud." He put the ring on her finger. It fit. They stood on the rooftop of Chicago Mercy Hospital in the September light, with the lake behind them and the city below them and 11 buildings on the skyline that would one day belong to a family that contained both of them. Gloria Cole and Eleanor Montgomery planned the wedding together. This was not something anyone had predicted. But Gloria called Eleanor in October and said she would like to help if Eleanor was willing, and Eleanor said yes before she had time to think about it. And they met at a coffee shop on Michigan Avenue and spent 3 hours talking about flowers and food and the particular challenges of seating arrangements when two families have very little overlap. At one point, Eleanor said, "I was wrong about your son." Gloria looked at her coffee. "I know," she said, not unkindly. "Just factually. But you came around. That matters." "Does it?" Eleanor asked. Gloria looked up. "He grew up in a world where people decided he wasn't enough before he opened his mouth," she said. "Every person who changes their mind is one less wall he has to walk through." She paused. "So yes, it matters." Eleanor nodded slowly. "Your Sunday chicken," she said after a moment. "Would you be willing to share the recipe?" Gloria smiled. "I'll do better than that," she said. "I'll teach you." The wedding was in November. Small, 40 people, which was the number Zara had always wanted and which Harold agreed to without argument, which was itself a form of change. The ceremony was at a small chapel on the north side. The reception was at the house on Astor Street, which had never held this many people laughing at the same time. Harold danced with Zara to a song she had chosen, something slow and old that her grandmother used to play. His heart beat steadily under his shirt. Repaired. Present. His. He held his daughter close and said into her hair, "I almost made the worst mistake of my life." "You didn't," she said. "No," he said, "but only because you didn't let me." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Thank you," he said, "for that." 3 years later, on a Tuesday morning in February, Daniel Cole stood at the window of his office at Chicago Mercy Hospital and looked at the city. 11 Montgomery Group buildings on the skyline. And beside them now, newly opened, the ribbon cut the previous month, the Gloria Cole Cardiac Center at Chicago Mercy Hospital, named after his mother. Funded by a gift from the Montgomery Foundation that Eleanor had proposed herself at a board meeting in September without telling Daniel or Zara in advance. Gloria had stood at the ribbon cutting in a coat she had bought for the occasion, dark green, with gold buttons, and looked at her name above the door of a building that would treat hearts that could not afford to be treated elsewhere. She had not cried. She had simply stood there for a moment, looking at her name in the light. Then she had turned to Eleanor, who was standing beside her. "You didn't have to do this," she said. "I know," Eleanor said. "That's why I did." Daniel looked at his mother's name above the door from his office window. He thought about Aurelius Webb, who had saved for 11 years to build something that should have already existed. He thought about Gloria, who had shown up every day for 26 years so that her son could stand in this building, in this city, doing this work. He thought about what a foundation actually was, not the depth of it, what it was made of. He picked up his phone and called his mother. She answered on the second ring. "Are you looking at the sign?" she said. "Yes," he said. She was quiet for a moment. He could hear her smile. "Good," she said. "Now go save somebody." He went. My wonderful friends, Daniel never begged for their approval. He never changed himself to fit their expectations. He simply kept showing up, doing the work, being exactly who he was. And one Friday morning in April, the man who had decided he was not enough trusted him with the most important thing he had, his heart. Real worth does not announce itself. It does not negotiate with people who are not yet ready to see it. It simply keeps working, quietly, completely, until the day comes when even the people who looked away cannot look away any longer. What did you think of Daniel and Zara? Was Harold right to change his mind, or did he change it too late? And what about Eleanor? Did she redeem herself in the end? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to hear from you. If this story moved you, subscribe to Empire Stories right now. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that where you come from does not determine where you are going. That a foundation is not about what you inherited. It is about what you are made of. A new story is coming very soon. You will not want to miss it. Thank you so much for watching. See you on the next one.